Hello, welcome to a brand new podcast of the Green the Desert podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Dorothy, from very crazy project that I really love so much. They're building a green wall in the desert to really stop the desert. Dorothy, can you tell me how do you do that? Build a green wall. How does it look like?
Thank you. My name is Dorothy Aseyo, and I'm the Executive Director for the Green Belt Movement. And this is an organization that is based in Kenya. And we've been supporting actually environmental conservation and community empowerment for decades. And this work spans from the work that was initially started by our founding member or our founding lead person, who was Professor Wangari Maathai, the laureate Professor Wangari Maathai, who was actually supporting women to be able to undertake reforestation and also build up economic livelihoods through initiatives that involved working around their farms and also reforestation efforts. And this is how Green Belt Movement has been able to continuously support a values-driven society of people who consciously work for continued improvement of a greener, cleaner, and of course, livelihoods work within Kenya and beyond in the region.
Wow, fantastic. So, if I understand it correctly, it has actually started as a program to empower women, and then this has actually grown into a movement to stop the desert.
Absolutely correct. Yes, it started as a program to support rural women in terms of accessing, of course, fuel, trying to really regenerate or work on degenerated land ecosystems that they were coming from. And of course, through this, they were addressing also livelihood components within their communities. And now it expanded and was able to now form a movement, which is a green belt movement. And as you said, building a green wall to really support reforestation and, of course, efforts to do with the regeneration of land systems and combating desertification.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they hear green wall, green belt, they think of a massive, like a green strip they're building. But I'm not sure if a lot of people actually know that these strips are composed of all little mosaics, all little projects. Maybe, like you say, women who have a small plot of land who are transforming it into a more greener space, and that they're like all puzzle pieces, um, creating this change. Does it work like that?
Yes, yes, it does work like that. And also, what I want to point out clearly is that Green Belt movement work has been focusing on what we call a watershed approach. Therefore, we've been having our major interventions or our major programmatic investments around land ecosystem regeneration through the key water towers. For example, in Kenya, we've been working in the 5 water towers. These are catchment areas that are very critical in supporting our ecosystem, especially in terms of water catchment areas. And in Kenya, there are 5 of them, namely the Mau complex, we have the Aberdares, we have Mount Kenya, we have Mount Elgon, and also the Cherengani Hill. So these 5 key water towers are the ones that we've been able to work very closely with communities and also the government and other stakeholders to undertake what we call a watershed approach, whereby we plant and care and nurture trees that are able to regenerate the ecosystem and ensure there is safe the ability of these water towers to continue providing the necessary um, uh, uh, the necessary resources like water
Yes.
of course, and any other resources that are able to be nurtured within that ecosystem for the communities, and of course, balancing the ecological integrity of these particular areas
Yeah.
and the country as a whole.
All right. So, do I understand it correct? For example, I have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 watersheds, like you would see on my hand between the fingers. That rainwater is falling on it, but right now it flushes all away. There is a lot of erosion, and water is not, infiltrating in the soil. What you are doing is actually stopping the water, making sure it infiltrates, and by planting trees, you also kind of restore the water cycle that way. Is it that what you're doing?
Yes, we do that, and we have a 10-step approach. This 10-step approach actually involves a lot of community education and empowerment process before we can even start our planting of trees and aftercare. Then from there, we are able now to make sure that we continuously engage with those communities in terms of how they're able to plant, care, and also integrate the livelihoods components. Because if at all people will be able to take care of forests, take care of land systems or ecosystems, they need actually to see the value of doing that. So we
Mm-hmm.
have also to incorporate a livelihoods component, which is integrated in our restoration efforts. So yes, we have the 10-step approach, which involves community education, environmental education and awareness component. Then we have the actual planting of trees and aftercare. Then we have now the integration of the livelihoods component, and of course what we do normally, like any other project, the monitoring, learning and feedback that is required across the loop.
I really love it when you say that it's so important to first start and connect with the communities and have this conversation and talk about why it is important. Uh, can you tell me more about that first step and about how crucial that is to make sure that the foundations of the start of the project are right?
Yes, we do have that process because it does help, especially when it comes to ensuring that we are able to, first of all, formalize our working engagements. For example, we have to register the groups or community structures, we have to register them. Then we have to take them through the education component, whereby we are able to tell them exactly what are the benefits of us engaging in conservation efforts, what are they entitled to undertake, what is it that they need to be able to bring on board, what are their contributions, and how will this process look like, and how will they be able to be taking care of the trees. For example, just the normal agronomic processes. And apart from that, we are able also to establish what we call tree nursery groups. So these
Hmm.
groups are very important. They are part of the structures that I was talking about in terms of community engagement. So apart from just the planting and of course growth and nurturing of trees, growers, the tree nursery growers are very important component. You can't plant trees if you don't have the seedlings or the trees to plant from. The tree nursery growers also are part of the green belt movement. In fact, in Kenya, we do have 5,000 plus tree nursery grower groups,
Wow,
which actually
5,000.
are,
That's a lot.
yes, they're cutting across the entire country. And this is a very critical building block for us to be able to really put together the seeds and grow the seedlings before we are now able to go and plant them in respective places or areas that have been identified for restoration or even for growth. So this is where we begin. But first of all, we have to do community engagements whereby we formalize the structures. We make sure that they are able to address any group dynamics or community dynamics. We are able to contextualize this particular engagement according to the contexts in which they are coming from. Then we take them through, of course, the community education and environmental education and empowerment processes, which I've highlighted include part of the agronomy, part of the nurturing and planting of trees and aftercare. Then, of course, integrating it later, the livelihoods component that is very critical to ensure sustainability of the efforts.
Yeah. And can you tell me about one of these projects that you were with from the very beginning that really touched you, where you saw a degraded place, you had a community that became empowered, and you really saw the transition not only on the fields but also in the mindsets and in the souls of people? Is there any one of these like very specific stories you could share?
Yes, we do have very impactful stories that have come out from restoration efforts that have happened. I will give an example of Mount Kenya region, whereby we were doing a project with one of our funders, and this project ensured that we are able to restore some of the degraded lands around the Mount Kenya water tower. And from this one, the groups that were involved in tree seedlings have been able to actually support themselves, even in terms of educating their children, because they have been getting proceeds from the sale of the tree seedlings to be able to support the restoration efforts. Then we've been able to have also because some of the trees that we were planting were both indigenous and also some of them were fruit trees. So we've been able to see on the farms improvement of the agroecology conditions of those particular farms. We've seen quite a very good balance when it comes to farmlands in terms of curbing soil erosion, in terms of ensuring there is correct cover for the crops within the setups which we grew those particular trees on farm and others even to adjacent forests. We've seen improved weather patterns,
Really?
microclimatic changes. Yes, we've seen microclimatic changes within
Can you
that
give some
region.
examples of what changed climatologically?
Yes, we've seen improved rainfall pattern, and also we've seen the wind, actually strong winds being broken. Like we have wind barriers, whereby now the winds are not very strong as initially they were. Then also the temperatures are a bit relatively lower compared to when it was before that project was done, like 2 decades ago. Then we've seen also improvement when it comes to even human wildlife interaction, because now the wildlife that was most of the time crisscrossing to come to farmlands, now it is able to be maintained within the forests, because the forests are now much better regenerated to be able to support the survival of the animals that were coming more often out of that to come and look for food, water, and other grazing lands on
Wow,
the
that's
farmland.
actually
Yes,
fantastic. Because
yes.
yeah, people
So
say, well, we have too much animals, they shoot them, but actually just create more forests so they stay in the forest, and then you don't have any problems with them anymore. Au contraire, you'll
absolutely.
have they'll help the ecosystem, so it's actually even beneficial for farms.
Yes, we've seen that, and it's a clear demonstration sometimes. Some of the problems we see, especially when it comes to human wildlife conflict, that is normally present around farmlands that border like forests, it's because of the degraded ecosystems within the forests. And once that one is taken care of, it tends to address such kind of problems. And also we see availability of more resources, especially when it comes to grazing, when it comes to water, when it comes to breeding grounds. They are much better available for them within that setup. So yes, we've seen such changes, and right now we are even having a mindset change, because we do have even community, we call them the green volunteers. That is community volunteers, green volunteers who've been working tirelessly through this journey. And some of them actually have become like beacons of knowledge, of hope for
Wow.
conservation efforts. And there are now even some of them, they're called names of prominent people who have been championing on conservation. For example, Professor Wangari Maathai. There is a lady I met within that region that I'm talking about in Mount Kenya, Hombe Forest, who actually right now they call her Professor Wangari, because she completely resembles and articulates the efforts on conservation that I was really advocating for. So yes,
Wow, it's
there is also
beautiful.
attitudinal change. There is a shift around community knowledge, community perception, and acceptance around conservation efforts and how it can be beneficial for their societies or communities. So yes, climatic, we have attitudinal knowledge and even livelihood changes that we've seen coming from projects that we've been having on board for some time now.
So you see a big change in the economies. Is that measured?
Yes, at household level, we've seen changes, because now households are able to even sell fruits from the trees that they have been able to grow. We've been able to see improved agroecological condition of their farms, and they've been able to grow more crops which are doing even better. For example, having better fodder for their animals, and from this they're able even to get, for example, those who are doing dairy farming, they're able to get a good supply of milk and any other animal husbandry venture that they've been able to engage in. Some of them are even doing apiculture, that is beekeeping, and they're able to
Okay.
get proceeds from selling the products from beekeeping. And this is an area that is significantly contributing to improved economies, of course, from household level and upwards.
Wow, that's really beautiful to hear. Would you say that trees are actually bringers of peace?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of the quotes that really Professor Wangari Maathai used to really pass across most of the communities and the world at large is that we plant trees because they are trees of hope, they are trees of peace, and trees of prosperity. These are seeds that you plant, but you'll be able to nurture them and be able to see a change in terms of how people engage, how people are able to perceive certain aspects, and how people are able to even engage themselves within a society. So I agree, these actually seeds of hope and seeds of peace that are planted when we are able to plant and nurture trees.
Yeah. And do you need a lot of technology and external funding to like have special machinery to plant these trees, or do you really empower them to use their own tools to do it?
Currently, things are shifting, and I think we are embracing more technology in terms of growing and, of course, planting and growing and nurturing of our trees. And what I would like to bring you up to speed is that most of our projects at Greenbelt Movement are geographical information systems enabled. So we use a geographical information system to be able to support our sites for planting, to be able to monitor, and also to give us continuous reports in terms of how the survival of these particular trees are happening. And we
Wow.
do it together with our communities, and we are passing that technology to them in terms of how we are able to plant, grow, and nurture trees. So yes, we are embracing technology, and not only at GIS level, geographical information systems level, but even at agronomical level, we are able to see how we can be able to adopt technology that supports regeneration in terms of planting, growing, and nurturing of trees. Yeah.
Okay. So, do I see it correct if then the locations where the trees are planted are put in this GIS system, and then, for example, the farmer itself can use its smartphone to, for example, say, well, this tree has died, and then they check it died, or this tree has yield so many kilograms of crops, and they can like add it to the specific tree. Is that the way how we should see it?
Yes, we've actually been adopting this, although not fully across all projects, but quite significant. I'll say scope of our projects are supported or enabled by geographical information systems, and yes, because we do both farm and forest restoration efforts. So you can imagine if at all we are doing a block of a forest, and we need actually to continuously monitor those particular trees, provide the necessary interventions when it comes to aftercare. We can only do that efficiently if at all we have a technology that supports us in terms of knowing how things are happening, and also just to inform even our partners, because some of our partners that have been funding this work are not based where we are doing this work, but they really need to see and know what is happening.
They
So they
want the
are
numbers.
yes, they want the numbers. So we quickly send them our updated maps that we are able to come up when we use our geographical information system, and they're able to see and monitor and even give us feedback on how we should be able to uptake the projects and the interventions moving forward. And this has come in very handy in terms of helping us to make timely decision when it comes to even supporting better practices or better uptake of how we are nurturing and ensuring survival rates of these particular trees, and how we are also able to inform them in terms of the progress that is happening. Yes, so technology is part and parcel of what we are putting across when it comes to our conservation efforts.
Yeah. And is this data is this shared with the world? So, for example, if other people would like to start something similar in another country or in another region, can they then learn from the lessons you've made?
Absolutely, yes, because this is what we are really advocating for, a lot of learning and knowledge sharing. And we are happy as Greenbelt movement to be able to provide this learning, to provide the best practices, and even what we call failing forward, because
Mm-hmm.
we've done some projects that actually have not been successful. We've learned the lessons, and we've been able to pick up whatever it is that we need to input into the next processes that have been able to now make sure we get it right. So failing forward, learning, knowledge sharing, and of
Nice.
course, being able to celebrate also some of the key achievements that have come in with the conservation efforts is what we are really supporting and proud of bringing out to the rest of the world. And yes, we are happy to learn together and be able to influence as much as we can across the world.
Wow, that's beautiful, and I love it that you say the celebration part, how important that is. Me personally, I have three missions, and it's regenerate, inspire, celebrate, which is exactly what you're doing as well. Because yeah, we need to regenerate land. That's very clear. We need to inspire other people, sharing the knowledge. And the third, yeah, if we don't celebrate every step, if we're not grateful with what we're doing, if we're not grateful today, we won't be grateful in 10 years. So very, very happy you're also spreading the celebration.
Yes, yes, and we encourage each one of us who is involved in any form of conservation of the mother earth that celebrate the little milestones. And I would want also to borrow from our founding lead, Professor Wangari Maathai, the hummingbird story. Do the little that you can do, but still continuously do your best in it and celebrate the little that you can be able to do. It will change at least something in the conservation efforts.
Yeah, that's a very nice symbolism with the hummingbird, this super tiny creature flying very fast with their wings, and they're doing tiny stuff, but they contribute to the entire ecosystem. So, very nice analogy.
Yes.
What I've been wondering, there are some people that I've talked with that say that it sometimes happens that organizations with a very good intention and a goodwill help come to African countries to regenerate land. They, for example, bring in very expensive machines like huge tractors that cost $300,000, for example, with this big plows, for example, the Valerani plow, which helps to increase rainwater catchment, which is actually very good technology. But if a project then ends after 5 years, for example, then people are stuck with the tractors, but they don't necessarily have the pieces or money to repair it, and then it just stays there as junk, and it doesn't it worked for 5 years, and then it's like thrown away money. Is this something that you've been witnessing? And if yes, how can we prevent such stories?
Good question and good observation. I think this is where we come in very strongly to really look at, of course, being context fit, or actually contextualizing the interventions that are uptaken for any of our projects or any of our areas that we would like to be able to engage each other. And I would just want to also draw your attention towards the partnership level that we have together with the communities and other stakeholders that we have to work together. So just looking at how we are able to work very closely to ensure that the technology that we come up with actually speaks to the needs, the contextual needs. And first of all, we have to do a very clear context analysis and be able to provide what is fit for that context, and also have measures that are able to support and address issues to do with sustainability. How is the sustainability aspect being taken care of in any project before even we start implementing or start having it on board in terms of our interventions? So to be able to address such kind of gaps that come in when you've already done maybe an intervention once, the partner or the donor or an investor, depending on whichever lens it takes, they are out of that particular process, then it does not continue. We have been able to see that, and now that is where we, as Greenbelt movement, establish very strong structures that are able to support sustainability and sustenance of the work that we are undertaking, and of course contextualizing, ensuring that we are context fit in terms of our interventions, and they're able to speak to the needs that are required even for longer term support that we will be able to live once we are able to maybe partner and reach at a point that we feel now it is better or it is good for them to take it or to pick it up from there.
Yeah. So if you say a context based, looking at the context and see that if there's, for example, a community which will never be able to generate the money to maintain a tractor, for example, then it's better to stick with hand tools, for example.
Yes, and also what I'll say, we look at what we call capacity strengthening. So we look at whatever already exists. what can we strengthen from there? Then, of course, there is a journey that will take shape into the strengthening process. And maybe from using the hands, they will go to an ox. Then from the ox, they will maybe transition to now a tractor when they have the capacity to be able to now utilize that very well. So we do not assume or we do not negate what is required in terms of sustaining and also supporting the capacity process or growth that is enabled to ensure that the interventions are able to peak well and also continue even in the mid and long-term lens for that particular community.
Yeah, that's I think very healthy to do it this way. How many years does it take if you start from a very degraded place and you go to a place where people's livelihoods are improved, where they are able to sell crops and yeah, have a much healthier ecosystem? Do you have an idea about that on average?
Wow, it depends. It depends on how the degradation was. And I can say without really trying to make it look like a very easy effort. Actually, it takes a lot of investments, especially resources from time, from actual resources in terms of even human resource, in terms of technical, in terms of even the actual inputs that are required to regenerate an ecosystem. So it's a very expensive affair, and that's why we highly discourage people to degrade the ecosystems, because getting them back to where they were, in fact, it's sometimes what we say impossible, because they will take another shape and format in terms of the regenerated landscapes and land systems. And nonetheless, when we have taken that challenge of restoring an ecosystem, it can take up to 2 decades to be able to regenerate it fully. So you can see
Wow.
how much investment that looks like. So
Yeah.
dedicated effort to over 2 decades, it means that we should not even degrade our ecosystems in the first place. So
No.
let's continue safeguarding and conserving whatever we have. And if at all we get ourselves in completely degraded ecosystems, then we need to ensure that we have the what it takes and the effort that it will be required to regenerate them.
Yeah. No, that's very important because I once heard the story of Jane Goodall, the primatologist who was telling that she first wanted to save the forests, save the monkeys living in it, but then she realized, yeah, but why are people destroying the forest? Well, it's because they are poor and they just need to survive, and then it's very logical that they're doing it. So in order to save nature, we have to save humans. Um, but what I think is can be challenging is the first step you were talking about how do you, for example, you see a degraded area where people like can barely survive because it is degraded. What is the key secrets to yeah have this first contact and have this first conversation and talk about it? That really intrigues me to because it's about a paradigm shift and how do you go on with that?
Yes, that is very correct, because everything stems up with people's knowledge and also attitudes being able to support the restoration efforts. And I must say that it's a long-term investment to ensure that we are able to continuously change the attitude. We are continuously able to work on some of the challenges that come in when it comes to people themselves being able to connect how their lives are being affected by what we call ecological well-being, making that connection to ensure that people understand that for my life to be, for me to have what we call, I mean, for people to have quality life or a quality state of life, then ecological well-being is also part and parcel of that. And we need to ensure that we take care of our environment, and how we are able to nurture that will be dependent also on our attributes when it comes to ecological conservation.
Yeah. And well, do you sometimes have resistance when you first approach people, and how do you deal with that?
Yes. I mean, one thing we must understand is that environmental conservation also borders what we call natural resource strive, in that people are striving to be able to access resources. Will it be water? Will it be land for farming or agricultural practices? Could it be even when we look at broader components of maybe wildlife conservation? So all these actually face some level of resistance. We've even had cases whereby we've been able to regenerate the land systems and they are invaded, and maybe people take the lands back into cultivation. They're able to destroy the trees and the forest cover. Yes, and this actually brings in a lot of resistance, but we work around that. When I was beginning this podcast, I informed you around our community engagement. So we have very strong community engagement as our entry point to ensure that we are able to bring all the community and actors on board. We are able to do community education, environmental education and awareness, to enable them understand exactly the importance of the interventions that we would like to partake together, and how this will have an impact on their lives, and how their contribution is meant to really support the processes. So yes, the resistance is there. Sometimes even it comes in from external. We also have even some external influences like commercial planting or plantations, commercial plantations, which take large chunks of land. And of course, if at all it's a forest, then it means that they'll clear out that particular forest and convert it into farmland. And exactly that now means that the ecosystem is completely changed, and we start now having the consequences of such kind of maybe we'll say resistance or interference. So yes, they're there all the way from community, internal led, and also externally when it comes to commercial plantations, issues to do with investor influence, and also large scale land use in terms of
Yeah.
how they would really be uptaken within a given
Yeah.
setup.
But then probably, like you said before, you have the green heroes, who are respected members of the community, who then probably come with you guys and talk with them, and they probably have a lot of respect for these people, and that maybe helps to to have one of their own, let's say, than giving their experience. Well, look, I first also had resistance, but then I did it, and now I'm super happy, and that I'm more willing to follow people who've like experienced it.
Yes, and I really like you pointing back to our green volunteers and heroes and heroines. Yes, these are the people who are I'll say our champions, who have been really showcasing the achievements and the milestones that have been taken up and are there. And they've been also having that special support in terms of championing the conservation efforts. And they clearly showcase that this is where we were, this is how we are now, and this is even how we should be looking at ourselves in the coming future. And the rest of the communities are able to see that, and even they're able to help us safeguard the gains that have been made, especially on environmental conservation, because also Green Belt movement does a lot of advocacy, and advocacy also looks at safeguarding some of the environmental conservation efforts from being eroded in terms of maybe, like we say, land grabbing, investor influencing, in terms of some of those challenges that come in when it comes to environmental conservation efforts. So yes, the green heroes and heroines and volunteers have been very instrumental in sustaining the work that we are undertaking as Green Belt movement with our partners across.
Yeah. I often see the world as a place that is actually formed by the stories we make and by the narrative we put in the world. And it's actually, the story that is told the most that will become a reality. And right now you have sometimes the stories of big plantations. But if you hear more stories about these green champions, then this will become the new reality. And I had a very interesting conversation with Chris Ray, a Dutch guy who actually also helps with the restoration of arid lands. And he told me about a very interesting project where they actually invested around $100,000 into buying a lot of airtime on the radio. And they invested it in journalists going around to interview farmers who actually were doing some regenerative stuff on their own, and sometimes on a very small level. But by putting these people in the picture, they didn't have to invest anything in special machinery and nurseries and nothing. They just like amplified the stories, the voices of these also green champions, you could call them. And because other farmers who had their pocket radio, they were listening to that, and they say, well, if this guy can do it, I can do it too. And I was really positively intrigued about this, that sometimes you just have to amplify the good stories.
Yes, and you bring in a very key component for our advocacy, because our advocacy revolves around amplification of the voices of course, the green champions, the green communities, and what they have been able to actually achieve, what their challenges are, and how we are able to bring them into the right spaces and being able to get the right attention. And this can only happen if actually we are able to tell the stories of change, the stories of success, and even the stories of failing forward, because these do build up into what we are calling narratives that are able to either change or even shift some of the dynamics that we are really grappling with when it comes to environmental conservation. So we've been working very closely with the structures that are able to help us to consolidate and even what we call build the momentum, because for the voice to be amplified, it has to be built, it has to be sustained, it has to be coalesced together, so that it's not only one voice, but voices that have been brought together to be able to really put together a narrative that is able to show, yes, conservation efforts are able to be done with homegrown solutions, organic interventions, and of course, with the people who are just like me and you, who are able to put in the little efforts that we can. So that is something that Green Belt movement has really provided a space for, and it's continuously using its what I'll say privilege and also standing as one of the key or one of the well-known conservation and community empowerment institutions in Kenya, in the region, and even globally because of our standing as part of the work that we have done for decades. We have been able to really bring together, rally together, provided a space and opportunities. And we've seen even into spaces around our national government efforts around conservation. Currently in Kenya, we are having a call to plant 15 billion trees, to plant and nurture and grow 15 billion trees by
That's a lot,
2032. That's a lot.
but
So
we
we
need
are,
them.
yes, we need them so that we can be able to adhere to some of the commitments that we have done, especially when it comes to global commitments around environmental conservation, and also our national commitments that we have seen really being taken up very well. So we provide that. We are able also to join ourselves in regional conversations and amplification of the voice. Even at global level, we've been able to engage and provide a space for our participation, for example, at the COPs, the Conference of Parties that are normally held across in different
Yes.
spaces. And we've been able to also have that as part and parcel of our amplification of our
Yeah.
voice. So that is something that we take it very dearly in terms of ensuring that the correct voice is able to be brought forth in terms of how it can influence our efforts and
Yeah.
even sustain. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's what a lot of people who are actually interested in stopping the desert, in regreening the desert, um, they often ask themselves, yeah, but what can I do? Because desertification is something that's yeah, a threat for humanity. Um, Even if we stop using fossil fuels today, climate change will still continue thanks to the way we do land management. So we really need to drastically change that. But a lot of people say, yeah, well, but what can I do? I live in a city. I live in New York. I live in Brussels. I live in Abu Dhabi. But what can I do? Do you have a clear answer on that? What you would advise people to do in terms of informing themselves, in terms of taking actions, in terms of advocating?
There are many ways. That's a good question. There are many ways to really support such kind of interventions, and this is where we call for solidarity. Yeah, we call for solidarity, whether you are living in Brussels, in New York, in Geneva. There is a way you can be able to actually be part and parcel of this journey or of this process. One of the things that we also advocate for is even looking at our greening practices. How are we having our greening practices even at individual level? How are we contributing to emission of greenhouse gases? How is our consumption? Are we even supporting recycling? How are you able to even influence some of the practices within maybe, for example, your institution? What is your sustainability agenda, and how does that one speak to the broader conservation efforts that we are looking at, even at the very basic level of, yes, planting and growing that tree somewhere deeper in maybe a jungle somewhere in Africa or whichever place it is. So one of it, as I've said, is how we are able to personally look at our own practices, our greening practices, and how that would influence the broader contributions to how we are able to support the efforts that are going on. Secondly, of course, we can be able to also put resources together. Some of the efforts that we've been able to see are coming from donations or even contributions and investments from different people across the globe. And we are seeing that one really gaining a lot of momentum in terms of how people are able to put the resources together to be able to invest them in some of the conservation efforts. So a project, some people even put resources together and they're able to support a project that will be geared towards conservation efforts. And this has really worked very well for us. In fact, we work with a lot of foundations. We are able to also call upon more foundations to come up, individuals, and even corporates to be able to support conservation efforts that are being undertaken by partners the level at which Greenbelt movement is working. Then other avenues for support would even include solidarity at advocacy level. I believe if at all we are able to maybe bring about maybe an area that we need to push, maybe to push back on the government, to push back on an investor that are trying maybe to take up processes and interventions that are contributing to more environmental degradation, or otherwise maybe that those ones that are putting in measures to conserve the environment, then you could potentially come in to support with that solidarity in terms of advocating for such kind of practices, such kind of investments. And this actually does not have any borders. It is borderless. So that is why we say conservation efforts are efforts that we can do them without borders, because the impacts or actually the effects of climate change do not delineate around borders. So
They ignore
even the
them.
interventions, they ignore the borders. So even the
Yes.
interventions are borderless, and that's why for us we look at ourselves as the green belt movement. So we can cut
Mm-hmm.
across as long as we are greening our mother earth. Yes.
No, definitely. So if I understand correctly, people can first of all look at their own lives, see how they can contribute to be more regenerative in everything they do, every transport mode they take, everything they buy, everything they eat. Secondly, they can invest money in projects that are doing the work. Thirdly, they can advocate at an institutional level or even at companies, for example, even the company where they work for, to invest in projects that are actually regenerating land, to boycott companies that are co-responsible for degradation. That's about what people can do, and I think there's maybe one more thing people can do, and that's being an entrepreneur yourself, maybe starting up your own projects to make this happen. And then I wonder, for example, I know a lot of people who actually have a very big heart for desert restoration, but they're kind of clueless on how to start this. Would you advise? If yes, how would you advise these people to start working in this space? Because I assume we don't want ecological colonialism and people saying, oh, now I'm going to Kenya, I'm going to buy here a gazillion hectares of land and I'm going to restore this. How would you find the right way to do it as an entrepreneur and a philanthrope and investor to do this kind of things?
Good question and observation. Yes, we need more investments, especially when we come to what I'll call a value chain based approach. So, identification of value chains that are able to support different, I'll say, levels of investments that are required for these particular interventions when it comes to environmental conservation. And looking at a value based chain approach is able to ensure that we have quite a very well a level of understanding on what we need to invest in and contextualize it and provide even specific areas of investment that are key towards supporting the ecological interventions that we are looking at. Picking, for example, when we are regenerating the ecosystems and we are able to look at maybe reforestation, we do have all the way from the value chain of how we get the seedlings, how we plant the trees, how we take care of those trees. The trees are able to really mature, and we are able to maybe use them for bee farming. And through the value chain of bee farming, we have quite a lot of diversified areas that we can be able to invest in. And apart from that, we are able also to maybe invest in silviculture around trees in terms of growing and regenerating. And currently, we do have also a growing interest when it comes to carbon credits. Such kind of a value chain approach in terms of investment would really ensure that more people are able to plug in and be able to support and also benefit from restoration efforts. So what I want to really echo is having a value-based chain approach in terms of looking at what investments can be done, mapping out that very clearly, and investing in very well in terms of different chains that can be able to be established, and utilizing them to really improve on the livelihoods or even economic well-being of the different actors across the chain.
Yeah, that's actually very sound advice. I think so. It's better if you want to be some positive change to come, let's say, to Kenya, for example, evaluate the value chain, and then maybe let's say, well, I'm gonna invest in 100 facilities to make honey and to put them in pots, for example, so they can be stored. Or I'm gonna invest in ways to process wood, for example. So you build up this ecosystem of processing tree products, and then people will be more inclined to plant trees, and will be more inclined to then sell them. And this way, you actually don't have to buy the land themselves and plant trees yourself, which is obviously a cool thing to do. Everybody loves to do that, but it's actually more effective to build this ecosystem next to it, so the rest can follow, and you can just empower the people to do it instead of you having to buy the land and plant the trees.
Absolutely spot on. We have to build ecosystems that are value chains driven, and they provide more avenues and opportunities for investment and, of course, for growth across the restoration efforts. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Dorothy, you gave us so much insight into your beautiful project, and insight into how it works, what the different steps are. I really would like to thank you for your time, and I'm also pretty curious on how you personally actually came into this space, what your personal story behind your passion to regeneration is, before we leave.
Wow, that is a very, very lovely question. I'll say that. Yeah, because personally, I really love plants. I'm somebody who really love gardening. And I think I also grew up in the rural areas. That is where I was born. And I grew up from a family that was really doing a lot of farming. So when I went into my studies, I actually delved into environmental studies. And I think this is something that has kept on really pushing me, because I'm somebody who really loves greener spaces, a green environment, clean environment, and finding myself also with very strong, I'll say, mentors who have been able to also champion conservation efforts has really kept on changing my push towards the work that I do even currently at the Green Belt movement. So I'll say yes, being actually born and bred from a rural setup whereby I started interacting with the farm at a very tender age. Then coming into the education level, I think I became really inclined towards environmental studies. Then after coming from school, getting into the career space, I was able to also interact with very strong and well-to-do mentors and also opportunities that were inclined towards environmental conservation and sustainability. And this kept on giving me the momentum that I have currently for the work that I do. And therefore, all of us are called upon to actually be able to nurture the earth. So if at all you're not able to nurture the earth, then you leave it even worse than you found it, which is not the best thing you could leave behind. So this is a clarion call for all of us who are listening to us in this podcast to be able to keep on investing in nurturing the earth.
Wow. What a beautiful message to end this podcast. And I love it how you radiate the love you had from a very early age, because if you love something, you will take care of it. So these are maybe my final words on this podcast. That's, yeah, in order to save the planet, we have to bring people in contact with nature so they learn to love it from a very young age and they become people like you, Dorothy, and spread the nurturing. Thank you so much for your time, Dorothy. It's been a real pleasure meeting you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak towards the work that we do at Greenbelt Movement, and we call upon anyone who will be listening to this to be able to join us in this effort. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Well, this is the end of the Green the Desert podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode where we're gonna talk about more ways to regreen the desert. See you later.